Hi friends, Prepared Suburbanite here. Recently I got a comment that really seemed to me at first was like, well, that's an easy question to answer. I can do that right away. And then I thought about it and I said, that's probably one of the most difficult questions to ever answer if you're a prepper. Stick around and I'll share it with you. Okay, so from John S. in a comment to my recent prepper gifting, a very prepper Christmas video, he posed this question. I've got a question. How would we know when the shit hits the fan? Well, at first it was like, oh, that's easy. I mean, there's another concept out there that I know it when I see it, but boy, to try to define it exactly, it's really tough. So let me take a couple of different approaches to what I think would be part of the answers. I guess it's relative and it's dependent on your own personal circumstances. I guess if you're in debt, struggling to get by on a day-to-day basis, you may have fallen a little bit behind with the rent or the mortgage payment, you may be a little bit behind on your installment debt payments, your car payments and that kind of stuff. You got creditors calling every once in a while, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get the call, you don't have a job anymore, you've been laid off. Now, you can go file for unemployment insurance, and you may end up getting 40 or 50% of your income for a short period of time, but you've got to be out pounding the pavement looking for another job. That could very well be when the shit hits the fan for you, if that's your circumstance. And I guess on the other end of the scale, this weekend there was a couple of news articles flying around that the mysterious planet Nibiru was going to crash into the Earth and be the end of civilization and the end of the Earth as we know it and all that. Well, I guess if that happened, that would be when you would know that the shit hits the fan. But between those kind of two extremes, there's a number of things that I think you've really got to take into consideration. You wake up one morning and you realize, hey, the power's out. And you start wandering around your house looking to figure out what time it is. And you look at your watch, digital, just a blank face staring back at you. You look at anything, battery-operated clocks, your electric clocks that may be on your stove or your microwave oven, whatever. Nothing's working, just blank. Try to turn on the TV to see what's going on, turn on the radio, maybe it can catch some news, figure out what happened, maybe somebody ran into a power pole or whatever, the power's out, who knows. But you can't get the TV to come on. Can't figure out what's going on. Well, time to go to work, so you run upstairs and turn on the water to wash up before you go to work, brush your teeth, there's no water. Well, it's really strange. So you muster up, you throw on some deodorant, put on a clean shirt, hop in your vehicle, try to start it up, nothing starts. No, it's just nothing there. You know it's got gas in it, but it just won't start. There's nothing. Well, gee, is that the beginning symptoms of the shit hits the fan kind of a scenario? What if there really was a coronal mass ejection that irradiated everything and blew out the power grid, blew out your vehicle's electronic system so it won't start, blew out all your radios and all your electronic equipment in your house? Yep, the shit's going to hit the fan real fast when that kind of stuff happens. But that's a pretty extreme example. And it can be a CME, a coronal mass ejection. Could be that the North Koreans decided to take out our grid with an EMP, sending up an intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead and exploding it a couple 300 miles above us in the atmosphere. That could truly take out the grid. Well, you know, you look around, you see beautiful blue skies and nothing really going on except nothing works. Well, now all of a sudden, we're in the 17th century again. We're in the 18th century, where you don't have the power grid anymore. And from what I understand, restoring the power grid could take a minimum of months in highly critical areas like the nation's capitals, state capitals, places like that, out to years to get it restored throughout the rest of the country. Well, my goodness, what's that going to affect? Well, it's going to affect our ability to buy food. It's going to affect our ability to purchase pretty much anything, because the transportation systems are going to be way out of commission. Your supermarkets aren't going to be able to rotate much of their inventory, because they're not going to get any new inventory coming in with the transportation systems being down. There won't be any deliveries. That means that the people that work in the supermarkets, that work in the service industries, restaurants and places like that, they're not going to have jobs. They're not going to have anything to do. And then what happens? Well, gee, there's no food. There's no running water anymore. And for those folks that aren't prepared, panic is going to set in. And I don't know really what's going to happen with respect to human nature and how it's going to drive certain people. Some people are going to deal with it in a mature, orderly fashion. They're going to assist them, their friends, their family, their neighbors. They're going to work together to try to figure out solutions so that everybody can survive. And then there's other folks that are just going to take it upon themselves to go raiding and looting and pillaging throughout wherever they happen to be, and take what belongs to somebody else so that they'll survive, and to heck with anybody else. That's a possibility. So with John's question here, how are we going to know? I think any time that circumstances are going to be so different that you're challenged, that the normatives that you're used to have disappeared, and it could be, you know, losing power, could be a natural disaster with hurricanes and floods and tornadoes and things like that that can cause a cascade effect of power outages and a lot of damage and disruptions in transportation systems. How are we going to know? I think anytime your red alarms go off in your head that says something's not right, and you can validate that in some form or fashion by comparing your experience with other people. I can picture what it would be like in my neighborhood here if all of a sudden the power was gone, we had no way to communicate, cell phones are dead, vehicles won't start, and we're a victim of an EMP. Well, it won't be too awful long before neighbors are going to start meeting out in the street. They're going to knock on each other's doors. They're going to say, what's happening in your house? And is it the same as in my house? I don't know what to tell you. Here it is. So there we are. And that's how you'll find out. Communication systems aren't going to be communication systems without the power grid being available. Without the electronics that we've depended on for so long, we're not going to have radio. We're not going to have TV. Yeah, there still may be a few guys with ham radios that have taken the proper steps to protect them from an EMP. They can get them running again. They can start communicating through their ham radio communication grid and start sharing information that way. I can remember when my brother-in-law's wife's family got hit with a hurricane in the Philippines, and the only way that we could get messages to his wife's family was through a friend who was a ham radio operator, and he was able to contact a ham in the Philippines, and they were able to exchange messages back and forth. We'd send a message, they'd get it, he'd pass it along, get it into the town, find the people, find the family, they'd respond, we'd get messages back, that kind of a thing. So it does work in that kind of a situation. During that period of time, the Philippines was just totally devastated with whatever typhoon happened at the time. Flooding and power outages and all kinds of bad stuff was happening, but we did find a way to communicate to my brother-in-law's wife's family in the Philippines, and by goodness, but that same kind of a thing is one of the few ways that we're going to have left to communicate across more than just the neighbor's fence. So other scenarios that are going to pop up that can cause a S-HTF kind of a situation, you've got an economic crisis, an economic meltdown kind of a thing. You will hear about that because it's probably not going to affect the power grid. There'll still be some communications, your television sets and radios and things like that. The internet should still be running, and you should be able to find out what's going on. If the market crashes like it did multiple times in the past, it's going to have a ripple effect in the economy. Gas prices, there'll be shortages of certain commodities. Gas prices will go right up through the roof. Transportation systems are going to be affected. Folks are going to get laid off, lose their jobs. Companies are going to go out of business, that kind of a thing. It's going to be, it can be a true S-HTF situation if we have a total market collapse, a total market meltdown. Now, the last couple ones that we've had, oh yeah, they were pretty serious. A lot of people lost a lot of money in stock valuation and bond valuation, that kind of a thing. But still, the rest of the world kind of muddled along, and there really wasn't. So some people had an S-HTF and others didn't. If you didn't have any money invested in stocks or bonds or anything like that, and your employment was not affected by an economic collapse, a recession, or a depression, then you continued to work right along. My grandfather was a plumber, and he had solid work throughout the whole depression of the 30s. In fact, he didn't even realize that the depression was going on. There was no breadlines for him and his family. He was a plumber. There was work all over the place. And all they had to do was just be fair and honest. They stayed in business throughout that whole period of time, and it barely affected him at all and his family. So those kinds of things in an economic collapse situation, it depends on where your areas of risk really are. If you're fully leveraged in the stock market and all your eggs are in that basket and the market crashes, yep, that's going to be an S-HTF for you. So being a prepper, I think when you've got to think about a question like, how are you going to know when the shit hits the fan? Like I said before, I think there's a parallel with another concept that I think I'm going to know it when I see it, but I'm going to have a real hard time trying to describe it in detail so that people can recognize it as well. But I know I'm going to know it when it happens. Being prepared for those kinds of disaster situations, those kinds of potentialities, I think is one of the keys for existence, one of the keys for a lifestyle of self-sufficiency. It's one of the keys for our responsibilities to ourselves and to our families. Having food, water, shelter, defense, having a plan to have all that stuff available, ready to use, to know how to use it, that's really kind of what it's all about. So beyond when are you going to recognize, or how are you going to recognize when the shit hits the fan, is that you need to have that plan for when it does happen. You've got a plan to live, survive, provide, and protect. This is the Prepared Suburbanite reminding you to be prepared always. And I'll see you in the next video.